Hi, I'm Misty Velasky, and you're watching Ojai Valley News in depth. Joining us today is Scott Daigre from Tomatomania. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
So you're going to be coming to Flora Gardens April 20th to 22nd, 9 to 5 every single day.
That's it.
What is this Tomatomania thing?
Well, I often describe it as a tomato circus, and that's kind of what it is. We run around in California, from San Diego to Sonoma, and then to the East Coast, and we do tomato seedling sales. So it's essentially a great event for a gardener who wants a little bit something different. This started almost 20 years ago, and been making tomato gardeners happy ever since. So we try to put together the greatest group of rare, weird, fun, and other tomatoes that we can, and then offer them for sale at great places like Flora Gardens.
Now, I've looked at your website, and you have some pretty funky tomatoes. What is this green tomatoes and purple tomatoes?
Well, that's the idea. That's the whole idea. We got to get away from and I shouldn't say that. Got to get away from the medium reds. There's so many good medium reds, I shouldn't go there. But, again, as I just said, I think it's the crux of this event is this is for people who want something different, and I don't want to scare away anybody, but really that's what they come for. They want a green tomato that has a tangier, different taste, maybe some pink in it. They want a lobed tomato that looks like a little bit like a pumpkin, right? They want all sizes. They want all that, and I think also. I think they want a little bit of the story that often comes with heirlooms, because that's kind of the heart of the event.
Sure, and you mentioned heirlooms. Now, what exactly is an heirloom tomato? How's that different from any other tomato?
Well, most of us think of it as an old tomato, and often that's true. But what the crux of it is that an heirloom tomato is true from seed. It truly is an heirloom, the most literal definition, which means if I save a seed from an heirloom tomato, I plant it out next year, or in 5 years, or in 10 years, or as long as it's viable, I get the same tomato. The same is not true of a hybrid, if you remember from your science classes in 6th grade. A hybrid is an F1 cross, which means that if you save that seed, you'll often get a parent. It will often revert. So it's unstable. And so an heirloom is literally an heirloom that can be, as they were, brought around the world. And they still have that tomato, for instance, that they enjoyed at home. And in their new homeland, there you are. You get the same thing.
And so these are grown all over the world, or where are you collecting these from?
Well, these are grown all over the world, and with the advent of the internet, there are thousands and thousands of tomato varieties that have been grown in little villages, huge cities, farms and fields all over the world forever. And typically, those places grew the ones that worked best for them, or they found ones that worked, and we gather them. Seed companies, as countries and farmers have allowed, seed companies have gone in and said, "Give me that unique something that you've been growing for years." Now we can find it more easily via the internet, and there you are. We shop seed. I have seed grown. We have great growers in Southern California that I can glean from, and we put all that together for these events.
So what's the weirdest tomato that you have?
Geez, everybody's definition of weird is different, right? It's just that thing I haven't seen before. I think for most people it's the stripes. What? How does that work, right? And there are a lot of people, the hybridizers and people that are into tomatoes and creating new tomatoes, are now paying attention to those weird things that they might have thrown out 20 years ago that look too strange. But the stripes are crazy, and you can get red with a yellow stripe, you can get yellow with a green stripe, you can get all sorts of things. And there are, again, 1,000 names, from Tigerella to German stripe to striped cavern to the whole, they just on and on and on.
So, do these taste good? I mean, what we're used to, a tomato, the taste that we're used to of a typical tomato, I would imagine there's a lot of other flavors. So do these?
What's interesting? It's a great point, because what's interesting is as you sort of advance through the colors, because maybe someone's never tried a green tomato. The taste is definitely different, but they're all good. And when grown correctly in your backyard, it's going to be as good as it can be. But yeah, they're amazing. Heirlooms were kept around because they were good.
Sure.
I mean, that's the essence. They didn't matter what color or shape or variation sort of happened on the plant. They were kept around in whatever village or somebody's backyard from year to year because, wow, I want to grow that tomato again because it was delicious. So most often, that's what we associate with heirlooms, is great taste.
And I know that Ojai's got some pretty good growing conditions here, but there's lots of things that you just can't grow in this area. So what works best here locally?
Well, the great thing about tomatoes is that they do tend to be pretty universal. Yes, there's a tomato that will excel in the south in the humidity, perhaps, or we talk a lot about short season tomatoes, which came from colder parts of the world where summers are short. They have to happen quickly. I find we've done field tests. We do all our tough love tests in the Upper Valley, and some of the ones that have worked for us year in, year out are things like Stupička, which is a Czechoslovakian heirloom. It's a small red early. It's the first thing in my garden and the last thing out in the fall. So it's an amazing producer. A French heirloom called Jean Flamme. Small orange with often a little pink blush on the blossom end. Very unique. Last year, we grew classics like Cherokee Purple, Gold Medal. They worked like a charm. A new green cherry called Green Doctors. I mean, on and on and on. So many work. And what's funny about all that, I love trying to get people what's going to work best in their backyard. But it's crazy because what works in my field may not work across the street. And it's the biggest challenge of the tomato world. Why didn't that? Why isn't it? Why can't they all be perfect all the time?
Sure.
And we're farmers. Things aren't perfect. So it's hard to say.
So are there any sort of universal fertilizers? If I come to Tomatomania, what kind of soil should I pick up? What kind of amendments?
Well, a lot would be the key word. You want a really, really rich soil, and compost is the best fertilizer ever. I mean, a well-composted, whether it's a bagged material or something you do in the backyard, a well-dried, a well-finished compost is probably the best fertilizer that you can give anything, whether that means adding it to a pot and mixing it with a premium potting soil planting mix kind of combination, or whether it means putting it in the soil and adding that to whatever your garden is, whether it's a well-tended garden of 20 years or a new spot that you might be trying, that's heavy clay or sandy or whatever it happens to be, rocky. So copious amounts of good compost is probably the best. And often you have to be careful because too much fertilizer is not a good thing for tomatoes. So they want a nice, even, and this is what compost is, a nice, even array of nutrients available. They don't necessarily need to be pushed because oftentimes you end up with a very huge, lovely green plant and no tomatoes.
So we were talking about this earlier. Other than the obvious, horrible little gopher pests, what are the most common things we need to watch out for?
Well, there are seasonal pests with tomatoes. Aphids early, spider mites late. It depends, and then people have odd, white flies and that happening. Probably the one I hear the most about is the hornworm.
I found those
large,
big nasties.
The one that makes your plant disappear, overnight. Not in the same way a gopher does, right?
Yeah.
But it makes the plant disappear because they're voracious. I mean, this is their host food. I mean, this is why they're laid there, or whatever the eggs. So hornworms are tough to spot, but it's an easy thing to solve. So you can use natural sprays for it. You can use inviting birds into the garden often helps because they're after them. That's what they want. So a bird feeder or a bird bath. That's nice. That's a nice addition. I always tell the story. I have clients who pay the kids down the street 25 cents for every one they find, and that's often the best way to get them out of there. So there are again, you're a farmer, so you have to be aware of what's happening with your plants. Try to locate any problem or identify any problem early, and then deal with it. Hopefully in an organic way, because I think that's best. But being aware is probably the best pest or problem preventative that a home gardener can have or do.
So you get the tomatoes in the ground, you grow them, you pull them off. What can you do with these heirloom tomatoes that you have? What kind of recipes do you have?
Well, my favorite recipe is a little bit of salt and a knife. Slice it up, add salt, and go. That's always my favorite. You can do everything, and I think the best thing about recipes is break the rules. In other words, people come to the event and they say, "I would like a paste tomato," and I say, "Well, have you ever made a tomato sauce or a spaghetti sauce out of cherries?" And they say no, and I'll say, "Try it this year," because it's really wonderful. So here's the thing: you can use any tomato for anything. Yes, some are easier to process, or some are meatier, or some are juicier. Make amends for that. Drain the juicy ones, right? Use the great tasting tomatoes in your garden so that you can do whatever recipe. We're doing roasting cherries for sauce, which I think is amazing. We're making all sorts of canning. We're doing all that kind of thing. Still, my favorite is slice it up, put a little salt on it, and go.
So how many hours do you spend in the garden?
Gosh, I always say I'm an enthusiastic gardener, but I'm kind of a lazy one. So I'm not the guy pulling out every last weed. I kind of let it be a little wild. So I don't overly coddle, which is kind of key in tomatoes also. You need to, over care sometimes works against you. But how many hours do I spend in the garden? I spend a lot just walking through it and trying to be aware. I don't know how many hours that relates to, but a lot of time.
Well, Scott, you're going to be at Flora Gardens April 20th to 22nd,
right,
9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Friday through Sunday, that's right.
Great. And we look forward to meeting you there.
Thank you. Well, it'll be fun. We'll look forward to talking tomatoes with everybody.
Absolutely. Now, for more information, where can people stop?
Tomatomania.com, first of all.
Good stuff.
Flora Gardens, obviously, if you want to stop in there, they'll have information there too. And that should tell you everything you need.
Scott, thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
I learned a lot.
Good.
I'm Misty Velasky. This is Scott Daigre. This has been Ojai Valley News in Depth.